Hello, I'm John McBride, and thank you for joining me to discuss the Edo period publisher, Tsutaya Juzaburo. We affectionately refer to him as Tsutaju. Tsutaju lived 1750 to 1797 in Edo, today's Tokyo. Over the course of his career, he discovered and supported the leading artists Utamaro, Sharaku, and Hokusai, and writers such as the incredible Bakin, my favourite, Jippensha Ikku, who wrote about the Tokaido, and the extraordinary Santo Kyoden. Tsutaju's publishing house, Kōshōdo, produced thousands of prints and countless books, but importantly encouraged creative talent, serving as patron and mentor. In 2025, Japan's national broadcaster NHK broadcast a year-long television series about Tsutaju. This encouraged a number of major art exhibitions, including the Tsutaya Juzaburo Creative Visionary of Edo exhibition at the Tokyo National Museum, and an exhibition in 2025 at the Sumida Hokusai Museum. Catalogues are available for purchase from both institutions. An excellent exhibition was also held about 15 years ago at the Suntory Museum of Art, which had moved to Tokyo Midtown near Roppongi in 2007. The catalogue for this exhibition can be found perhaps in used bookshops. And this is the 2025 NHK drama titled Berabo Tsutaju Eiga no Yume Banashi. It was incredibly popular and it's available for purchase on DVD from Amazon Japan. The series starred Yokohama Ryusei as Tsutaju. The story centers around mid-18th century Japan. At this time, the senior counselor and member of the Council of Elders, his name was Tanuma Okitsugu, prioritized commerce over agriculture to rebuild the nation's finances. As the economy improved, a relatively liberal atmosphere emerged among the common people, fostering cultural development. One of the central figures in this cultural movement was Tsutaju. However, when the era transitioned to Matsudaira Sadanobu's governance, stricter controls on entertainment were imposed, causing great hardship for Tsutaju. Even so, he remained undeterred, discovering and making talents such as Utamaro, Hokusai, and Sharaku famous. The series also stars Koshiba Fuka as the Oiran, or the most senior courtesan, Hananoi, who inherits the venerated name Segawa V. In 1783, Tsutaju moved his Kōshōdo bookstore, which was located near the main gate of Shin-Yoshiwara, the courtesan district, to the Nihonbashi district of Edo, the center of Edo life in Edo. In fact, his bookstore was on the main street of Edo. He published sharebon and kibyoshi, these were light fiction works, and produced and sold numerous print works, particularly those by Kitagawa Utamaro, Santo Kyoden, and Tōshūsai Sharaku. His influence over Edo's publishing culture from this Nihonbashi base was enormous. This is an image of the Kōshōdo bookstore from 1784. We can see the trademark of Tsutaju, ivy leaves under Mount Fuji. The image was published in a book by Ota Nampo, which was published by Tsutaju, and a summary follows for your reading pleasure. We can also see the illustrated light fiction novels lined up in the store. I'll leave the summary for you to read at your leisure. The novel is a rich depiction of Edo-era culture, from the Shin-Yoshiwara brothels to New Year rituals. The tone is humorous and absurd, characteristic of the kibyoshi genre, illustrated comic novellas popular in the late Edo period. The protagonist is a Chinese man who becomes more Japanese than the Japanese, lampooning both cultures and the blind admiration for foreign customs. I'll leave you to read this at your leisure. Tsutaju was born in Shin-Yoshiwara, the courtesan district of Edo, in 1750, the third year of the Kangen era. Tsutaju was a booklender. He proved himself with the publication of the Yoshiwara Saiken, a guidebook to the red light district, before going on to publish a flood of illustrated storybooks in various genres. This magnificent work you see here is by Utagawa Toyoharu. Privately owned, it shows us the Shin-Yoshiwara courtesan district where Tsutaju was born. On the right of this screen we find the Omon Gate, the only gate in and out of the Yoshiwara district. In Edo it would have been called the Daimon, but Omon was the way that people in Kyoto referred to the gate to their courtesan district. So in Edo as well they used this sophisticated language. The courtesans were held captive and could not depart through this gate freely. The main street is called Nakanocho Avenue, and it is lined with blooming cherry blossom trees, under which we see courtesans walking back and forth, enjoying the view of the flowers in the night air. Tsutaju left home at a young age and was adopted by a Yoshiwara merchant. The name Tsutaya was the name of that merchant shop, and the family rented a space just in front of a tea house near the Omon Gate, where Tsutaju began lending books at the age of 23. The original Yoshiwara was in fact located near today's Ningyo-cho. It was the red light district of Edo and was therefore home to the brothels of the city. It was officially recognized by the shogunate in 1617. However, 40 years later, the Great Fire of Meireki tore through the city, burning it to the ground, and the Yoshiwara courtesan district was moved to Nihonzutsumi, an area closer to the outskirts of Edo, just beyond the Asakusa Temple, Sensoji Temple. That place came to be known as Shin Yoshiwara, or New Yoshiwara. The licensed pleasure quarter was tolerated as a necessary evil by the shogunate military government, and in a spiritual sense, Sensoji buffered the city from the quarter's evils. Yoshiwara was a bustling, glamorous world for the clients who visited it, but most of the courtesans who worked there were indentured to their employers as young girls. They were sold into servitude and required to work off their debts before they would be freed. There was another side to Yoshiwara, however. It was a place where the wealthy would gather, filled with samurai, rich merchants, kyoka, or comedic poem poets, and playwrights, those who always knew what the next fashion was before it became fashionable. Tsutaju's strength lay in harnessing the rich network of information and people he found in the streets of Yoshiwara. The first publication that Tsutaju was involved in was the Yoshiwara Saiken, a guidebook to the Yoshiwara district, complete with the names of brothels and courtesans working them. Publication of the Saiken was monopolized by a major local publisher named Uroko Gataya Magobe, and Tsutaju was hired as a researcher to revise or update old information found in the guide. His hard work was rewarded when the revised version was published under the name Saiken A Oedo and was received well by the public. The foreword to Tsutaju's version of the Saiken was written by a famous polymath of the Edo period. His name was Hiraga Gennai. He lived 1728 to 1780. Now, this foreword was transcribed by the students at the Cambridge University Summer School in Early Modern Japanese Paleography in August 2025. I also attend the summer schools, and my translation is as follows. Now, with contemporary eyes, this is a totally inappropriate statement on how young girls are chosen by traffickers, pimps, and brothel owners to be prostitutes. Gennai was homosexual, but I think he appreciated and liked women. Now, this passage is read out entirely in the original Japanese of the Edo period, in the NHK Tiger drama, and only when voiced do we appreciate the beauty of the language and the way it in fact praises women. Now, this may be difficult to believe unless you listen to the vernacular, and I do stress here it's rather offensive nature in my translation and with our contemporary eyes. I'll leave you to read this page and the next at your leisure. The following year, Tsutaju published his own original version of the Yoshida Saiken at the age of 26. That version was called Magaki no Hana, or Flowers on the Hedge. Tsutaju lowered the cost of publishing the guide by increasing the page sizes and by combining 2 pages of information onto 1 page. He also included images of the shops on each street, lined up on the top and bottom of each page, so that anyone who picked up the guide could see what it felt like to experience the Yoshiwara itself. Tsutaju's version of the detailed guide to Yoshiwara apparently sold well, being both cheap and easy to read, which was surely a boon to the stagnant district, bringing in more clients. In NHK's drama, in the first episode, Tsutaju is encouraged to publish this guide by authorities to increase business to the brothels. But a young courtesan dies in the same episode from starvation, a symbol of the mistreatment of the women. This is Utamaro's illustrated guide to the Yoshiwara, published in 1804. We see the lattice screens behind which the girls would present themselves to the public of an evening. This was written by Jippensha Ikku, the famous author I've already mentioned, and mentored by Tsutaju. And a photograph from the late Edo period, Professor Tanaka Yuko states that the average life expectancy of the women was 23. They died not from disease, although many of them were certainly affected by venereal disease. Syphilis was the disease of Edo, but they died from malnutrition. They were not allowed to eat the extravagant cuisine that they were serving to their customers. In NHK's drama, Tsutaju is associated with the senior courtesan Hananoi, and it is in one of Tsutaju's publications that the announcement that Hananoi had taken on the name of the venerated Segawa V was made in the Yoshiwara Saiken. The name Segawa appears in Magaki no Hana. This is another page from the Shin Yoshiwara Saiken, Magaki no Hana, from the 4th year of Annei, 1775. And again, you can clearly see the main avenue of Yoshiwara, the Nakano-cho Avenue. And on the final page, we see the publisher's name, Tsutaya Juzaburo. Tsutaju was first to publish a pair of books called Hitome Senbon. Hitome Senbon was essentially a 2-volume commentary about courtesans, but the pages contained illustrations of magnolias, orchids, peonies, and other flowers depicted as being placed in vases at jaunty angles. The illustrations were the work of one of the more popular painters of the day, Kitao Shigemasa, whom Tsutaju likely was able to bring into the project through the connections he had made in the Yoshiwara. Besides the flowers, we find the names of the brothels and of the courtesans working there. In this context, the phrase Hitome Senbon means 1,000 flowers in one glance. The publication was a chic allusion to the world of courtesans and the then popular art of flower arranging. The funding needed to publish Hitome Senbon was apparently gathered from courtesans, their clientele, brothels and tea houses, and the work was not put up for sale to the public. It is thought that the courtesans would have distributed copies of it to their best clients. Riding on the momentum generated through the publication of Hitome Senbon, Staju decided to enter one of the hottest markets for Edo booksellers dealing in ukiyo-e, the lavish, brilliantly coloured single-page paintings known as nishiki-e. Staju collaborated with one of the most established publishers of the day, Nishimuraya Yohachi, to release this series of bijin-ga, the name used to describe works depicting beautiful women. The series, the work of a popular artist named Isoda Koryusai, is called Young Women of the Pleasure District in New York's New Year's fashion. What makes these works special is their sheer size, a format known as orban. Bijin-ga of that era being usually a more middling size called chuban. The large works depict newly appointed courtesans in glamorous garments accompanied by apprentices and servants. Seen together, they resemble a clothing sample catalogue, with the women colourfully captured in various scenes of daily life and clad in the latest fashions. Koryusai went on to produce roughly 140 works for this series between 1775 and 1781. And I'll leave you to enjoy these works at your leisure. The initial runs of these illustrations displayed the Eijuro publisher's mark used by Nishimuraya and the Koshodo mark used by Staju. But the Koshodo mark is not seen on later editions. While this series was very popular, Staju's relationship with Nishimuraya seems to have deteriorated. After 1782, Nishimuraya employed painter Tori Kiyonaga and continued publishing this series. In 1777, when Staju was 28 years old, he set up his own shop a few shops down from Tsutaya and began publishing works in popular literature genres such as sharebon and kibyoshi. He collaborated with Hoseido Kisanji, a frequenter of the Yoshiwara district and best-selling artist, who also wrote the foreword to Staju's new version of the detailed guide to the Yoshiwara Magaki no Hana. Here we can see the Nihonzutsumi embankment to the far right and the curved 50-ken road, referring to its length, about 160 meters, down to the main gate to Shin Yoshiwara, the Omon. And Staju's shop front is 5 shops away from the main gate. Sho Hichiriki was at Staju published sharebon, a satirical genre of works featuring stories set in red light districts. This work was by Kisanji and was in the style of a geographical journal and introduced readers to the Yoshiwara. It is a brilliantly playful yet earnest piece of gesaku, satirical fiction, that guides readers through Yoshiwara as if it were a geography book, treating each town within Yoshiwara as if it were a province, each brothel as a district, and each courtesan as a famous landmark. The next work Staju published 3 years later was a type of book known as a kibyoshi, titled Date Moyo Mitate Horai. The last page of this book even has an advertisement for a new book in which a man is seen raising a curtain on a stage, so he's revealing his latest publication. On the back of his kimono, we see the outline of Mount Fuji, within which is the Chinese character for joy. This was Staju's own mark at the time, suggesting that the man represents Staju himself. Staju didn't just hire popular artists, he used his own name as a way to promote their works, creating his own brand identity, Tsutaya Juzaburo, publisher. The book starts with a poor merchant by the Mannen Bridge in Fukagawa, and this gentleman is called Mangemon. Mangemon sells eels and soft-shelled turtles. Faced with financial hardship, he is forced to sell his beautiful only daughter to the pleasure district of Yoshiwara, where she becomes a kamuro, a young attendant. Stricken with guilt, he gives up dealing in living creatures and instead begins selling turtles near the Eitai Bridge. The daughter serves as a kamuro to Umegae, a courtesan of the Matsubaya house in Yoshiwara. And touched by Umegae's kindness, Maemon visits Yoshiwara to express his gratitude, but instead Umegae gives him 3 ryo, 3 gold coins, a considerable sum of money. Using the 3 ryo or gold coins, Maemon purchases a legendary giant turtle from the Boso Peninsula. You can see the turtle on the back of the horse. And rather than seeking profit from the turtle, he chooses to do a good deed and releases the turtle into the sea. The turtle, moved by his compassion, transforms into a human to return the favour. Disguised as a man, the turtle redeems Umegae from the pleasure house with 1,000 ryo and invites her to Ryugajo, the dragon palace under the sea. Umegae enjoys her time at Ryugujo with the turtle turned human. But one day she sees her former lover, Senshu, fishing at sea. Conflicted, she confesses her true feelings to the turtle, who honours her honesty and respectfully sends her back to the surface. Umegae returns to the Matsubaya house and is reunited with Senshu, and the story ends in a joyful, happy conclusion. Staju published a kisanji kibyoshi called Mirugatoku Isui no Yume in 1781, and this was selected as the best in the industry in Kikujuso, a kibyoshi review journal published by a prominent Kyoka poet, Ota Nampo. That helped spread Staju's name far and wide. Miruga toku isui no yume is a phrase that means even a dream seen in a short time can offer something of value. Hosei do Kisanji's story sees a rich man's son steal money from his parents to buy a dream and lives a life of extravagant luxury. When he returns home at age 70, he finds the family business in ruins, but it turns out all of this was merely a dream seen in the short time it took to boil soba noodles. The story suggests that worldly glory is fleeting and insubstantial. This dream is like a magical pillow that allows the user to experience glory and splendor in a dream world. In the dream, Seitaro travels across the land, gaining wealth and fame, and lives a dazzling, luxurious life. The story teaches us that even if it is only a dream, there is something to be gained from the experience. This tale uses the metaphor of a one-boiled dream to express how fleeting wealth and glory can be. Yet it also delivers a deeper message that even brief experiences, like a short dream, can hold meaning and value. With kibyoshi and their satirical yet realistic glimpses of the world all the rage, Staju published hit after hit and became one of the famous booksellers in Yoshiwara. In 1783, when he was 34 years old, he finally opened his own shop in the center of Edo's publishing world, the Nihonbashi neighborhood of Tori Aburacho. Now, this color image is from Ehon Toto Asobi, picture book enjoyment in the Eastern capital. It is titled Illustrated Storybook Store. This version was published by Tsutaya Juzaburo II in Kyowa-2, or 1802. Now, in Kansei 11, 1799, Tsutaya published the kyoka, or comic poetry anthology picture book, Azuma Asobi. The poems were compiled by Asakusa-an Ichijin, and it was illustrated by Katsushika Hokusai, the venerated Hokusai. Later, the illustrations from that work were extracted, printed in colour, and published separately as this book, Ehon Toto Asobi. The original edition was therefore monochrome with the kyoka poems. This image depicts the storefront of Koshodo, but after his death and after his successor had taken over the store. The curtain hanging outside the shop layer is emblazoned with Staju's ivy leaf within Mountain Fuji emblem, the nod to star or ivy in his name. This is Koshodo, his publishing house in Edo's Nihonbashi Aburacho neighborhood, where today we find Odenmacho. And this is his trademark, an ivy leaf below Mount Fuji. Sta is ivy. Now, a small sign marks the location in today's Odenmacho. The address is 13 Banchi. The street is depicted in Utagawa Hiroshige's Return to Odenmacho in his print View of the Prosperity of Odenmacho in the Eastern Capital. You can see all these publishers lined up surrounding Tsutaya's own bookshop. Now, Odenmacho was actually the main street of Edo, called Honcho, and Honcho was also the Nikko Kaido, or one of the 5 main highways of Japan. It crossed through the Tokiwa Bridge Gate, departing Edo Castle, and then out through the Asakusa Bridge Gate, before crossing the Sumida River and onwards on an approximately 3-day walk to the mausoleum of the first great shogun of Edo, Tokugawa Ieyasu, at Nikko. Tori Aburacho was the heart of publishing in Edo, and thereby the home of many prominent publishers like Uroko Gataya Magobe, whom Staju had first dipped his toes into the publishing world, and Nishimoriya Yohachi, Staju's great rival in the business. The shelves are filled with newly published ukiyo-e works, and samurai and their attendants peer into the shop, illustrating just how important the shop was as a centre for culture. Now, as I mentioned, this work was published after Staju's death, but the illustrations were provided by Hokusai, who at the time was still an unknown on the scene when Staju discovered him. Hokusai would go on to create actor prints and many other illustrations for Staju. This is the original monochrome version published by Staju in 1799, held by the British Museum. Now, we have one further illustration of Staju's bookstore in this book, the Dore Hyakunin Isshu, a parody of the 13th century famous Hyakunin Isshu anthology of aristocratic poems. Dore Hyakunin Isshu was published by Tsutaya Juzaburo. It's a humorous anthology of kyoka, comic or satirical waka poems, published in 1793, or the 5th year of Kansei. The poems were compiled by the poet Shikatsube Magao, also known by his pen name Kyokado. And this collection features 100 kyoka composed by various poets, each accompanied by an illustration. And the one we see here is Staju's poem and features his shop. We see his trademark and the words Soshia Tonya, or seller of popular fiction. His poem is under his pen name, Tsutano Karamaru. His kyoka poem is Aobon no haru, yarai ni keri, hitohake ni kasumu inata no higashi yama yori. Now, the surface, kyoka always have puns or dual meanings. So the surface meaning is that as if the spring maiden, Saohime, from the eastern mountains had brushed a single stroke to bring spring, the flourishing season of Aohon, the illustrated storybooks, has arrived. But the hidden meaning is that his great author, Santo Kyoden, who had been in a haze after receiving punishment, he'd been in handcuffs under house arrest for 50 days, now suddenly sees the arrival of spring in this world of the flowery illustrated story books. So fabulous dual meaning. And you may know the original anthology, the Ogura 100 Poets, completed in the Kamakura period by, compiled by Fujiwara no Teika, the famous poet. And he took one poem from each of 100 of the best poets in chronological order, from Emperor Tenji to the retired Emperor Juntoku, to decorate the sliding doors of the Ogura Mountain Villa, the summer home of the general and poet Utsunomiya Yoritsuna. Now, many of the selected poems were ornamental in nature because they were meant to be used as decoration. 79 of the poets were male, 21 were female, and so our anthology exemplifies the Edo period penchant for parodying classical works. They infuse humour and contemporary references. So the Dore Hyaku issue offers a satirical take on traditional poetry, reflecting the cultural and social nuances of the time. Now, the term Dore is a playful expression derived from the polite phrase Dozo hairi kudasai, meaning please come in. So in the context of this anthology, it serves as a witty invitation, aligning with the collection's light-hearted and festive nature. Sorry, allow me one more illustration related to the publishing industry, not his bookstore. This is one from my favourite author, Jippensha Ikku's Atariya Jihon Tonya. But in this example, we see the woodblock carvers preparing the blocks, perhaps for one of Staju's publications. Here are some of the other illustrations from the original Azuma Asobi, 1799, Amusements of the East, in one volume. They were famous places of Edo. To remind you, painted by Hokusai, published by Staju. This is Nihonbashi Bridge, the Echigoya department store, today's famous Mitsukoshi department store. This is the wonderful Nagasakiya in Nihonbashi, the inn where the Dutch would stay on their visits from Dejima in Nagasaki to Edo. And there are fascinated passers-by peering in to look at the strange Westerners. This store along the Nihonbashi Avenue sells Asakusa Nori, or the seaweed, the paper-like seaweed. These stores still flourish in the Nihonbashi area. And this, of course, is the Shin-Yoshiwara courtesan district. And, of course, Staju's store. To explain the seemingly random character of this book, researcher Suzuki Jun has suggested that the illustrations were originally intended for a volume on famous places in Edo, but they were hastily repurposed for this New Year's Kyoka poem anthology. And then in 1802, the illustrations were reused, but reorganized for their original purpose and without kyoka in the full color guide to famous places in Edo, Ehon Azuma Asobi, issued by the same publisher, but Tsudaju's successor, Tsutaya Juzaburo II. Now, so basically this is a commentary about payment for the authors. So basically until the superstar authors Kyoden and Bakin, authors were not paid, and so they had to have full-time work and write on the side. Kyoden and Bakin were perhaps the first full-time professional authors, and even then they were held to an exclusive arrangement by Tsutaju for 6 or 7 years. So this commentary was transcribed at Cambridge again, and I've translated it here for your reading at your leisure. So these reforms were sort of re-energized, I guess, and the Kansei reforms were a series of rules and morality edicts implemented during the Kansei era of 1789 to 1801. And they drove satirist Hoseido Kisanji to put down his brush, and Tsutaju began publishing works by local businessman, writer and artist Santo Kyoden. So the good effect was that it drove Tsutaju towards Santo Kyoden, who's miraculous. Kyoden studied under ukiyo-e painter Kitao Shigemasa, and as an artist, a very fine artist, he was known by his pseudonym Kitao Masanobu. One of his most popular works was the kibyoshi titled Edo Mare Waki no Kabayaki, or Edo-born dandies charcoal roast, which was released 2 years after Tsutaju moved his publishing house to Nihonbashi. The title was a play on words from a phrase that means Edo-style broiled eel. It was immensely popular, with the name of the main character, Enjiro, becoming synonymous for a man who is very conceited. Enjiro was the son of a millionaire. He's unattractive, but harbours a strong desire to be recognised by society as a refined and charming man. Together with his pleasure-seeking friends, Enjiro devises a series of absurd schemes, hiring geisha to dramatically burst into his house, attempting a double suicide with a courtesan from Yoshiwara, and other such attention-seeking antics. However, every plan ends in utter failure, and Enjiro becomes the object of ridicule and exasperation from those around him. Eventually, Enjiro is scolded by his family, sees the error of his ways. He reforms and marries the courtesan who had participated in the staged suicide, and settles down to build a respectable household. Reflecting on his foolish experiences, the story goes that Enjiro commissions the author Santo Kyoden to publish them as a kibyoshi, a popular illustrated comic book. This work is a satirical portrayal of the youth of Edo, resonating with the readers of the time, and earned considerable popularity. Upon the death of Ieharu, the 10th Tokugawa shogun, a man named Matsudaira Sadanobu rose to become chief counselor to the shogunate. And in 1787, he began implementing a series of societal edicts and interventions referred to just now as the Kansei reforms. The reforms emphasized strict frugality and had a major impact on the satirical works that Staju was publishing. The 1787 reforms were actually a strengthening of these reforms that I'm showing you here, issued in the 7th year of Kyoho, 1722. Again, these edicts were transcribed by the summer school students at Cambridge, and my translation follows, which will allow you to read at your leisure. This is from the Senyo Eikyu Roku Ofuregaki, edicts issued during the rule of Shogun Tokugawa Yoshimune, particularly aimed at improving the fiscal situation and maintaining social order. So I'll allow you to read them at your leisure. One work Staju published the year after the reforms were launched was a kibyoshi by samurai artist, satirist Hoseido Kisanji. And this was titled Bunbu Nido Mangoku Doshi. The story was set in the 11th century Kamakura period and featured Minamoto no Yoritomo, Japan's first shogun. The title draws an analogy between mastering the two paths of literary and martial arts, Bunbu Nido, and a rice polishing tool, symbolizing how refining both mind and body leads to being highly valued in society. In the story, Yoritomo orders his chief retainer, Shigetada, to label the lords of the land in one of three categories, literary, military, and useless, and to guide those deemed useless to become either literary or military type lords. It seemed to capture the era as it really was. It was an unprecedented success. However, the work was seen as a satirical commentary on the promotion of literary and military arts advocated for in Sadanobu's reforms, and Kisanji was subsequently chastised by the lord he served and was ordered to quit the world of satire. Now, in the story, Yoritomo expresses concern that in this time of peace, an obvious reference to Edo, the way of the sword or martial arts is being neglected in favour of the way of letters, literature and learning. Shigetada responds that he will present to the shogun those who belong to neither the idle and unmotivated Nurakura samurai. Shigetada tells his samurai that there is an elixir of immortality inside Mount Fuji, and all the warriors rush into the cave to seek it. Within the cave, they are naturally separated into three groups: those skilled in letters, those skilled in arms, and the Nurakura, useless samurai. When the count is taken, the martial samurai outnumber the literary ones, fair enough, much to Yoritomo's satisfaction, but the Nurakura useless outnumber both combined. To further evaluate these Nurakura, Shigetada gives them a 21-day vacation at the 7 hot springs of Hakone, observing how they spend their time. This is Yumoto. At Yumoto, samurai enjoy kemari, kickball, ikebana, flower arranging, incense appreciation, and tea ceremony. Here they are doing tea ceremony. At Tonosawa, up in Hakone, they play go, shogi, karuta, cards, and entertain themselves with geisha. This is Dogashima, see the title on the top right. They indulge in wild dancing with music, and they go fishing. On the left, this is Kiga. They chant kawato music and enjoy keeping pet birds like robins and quails. And on the right, at Miyanoshita, they enjoy archery and chanting gidayu songs. At Sokokura, they engage in homosexual play with young boys, even wrestling naked. And Shigenobu keeps track of all their exploits. He's writing it all down. This is one further hot spring, Ashinoyu. They wander Hell Valley, flirt with women and get rejected. They're robbed by bandits, actually disguised as Harizawa Rokuro and Honda Jiro. You can see their names on their kimono. Now, it doesn't stop there. After leaving the hot springs, they reach Oiso, a town on the Tokaido, but Shigetada intentionally builds a dam nearby to flood the river, preventing them from returning to Kamakura. As a result, they spend 15 days in the pleasure quarters of Oiso, indulging in brothel entertainment. Seeing an opportunity for profit, the brothels charge inflated prices, and the samurai accumulate 30,000 ryo, or gold coins, in unpaid bills. Desperate, the samurai gather around a pond in one of the guest houses and, imitating a sacred bell called the Muken no Kane, bang ladles in unison while shouting, "We want 30,000 ryo!" And magically 30,000 gold coins emerge from the pond, another ruse orchestrated by Shigetada. Eventually, it's revealed that all of these events, from the Fuji Cave to the Oiso episode, were part of Shigetada's scheme to classify the samurai into literary, martial, or idle categories. The idle samurai are chastised by Yoritomo himself, who says, "Call yourselves men of letters or arms, if you dare," which is a pun on the phrase, "Untomo suntomo iwanai," they won't say a word, and there we end. Now, this was highly insulting to the samurai of Edo. So, we next find a work depicting a man kneeling with his hands on the floor, titled Majime Naru Kojo, or a serious message. The arm of the man's kimono is decorated with Staju's own ivy under Fuji mark, showing us that this is meant to be him. Santo Kyoden was the author of a kibyoshi published during the crackdown titled Hakoiri Musume Menya Ningyo, and he too suffered from the attentions of the authorities during this period. Kyoden once gave thought to giving up writing altogether, and this message describes the struggles Staju faced in trying to convince Kyoden to continue for just another year. The readers of Edo must have experienced quite a shock in seeing this image of Staju, head bowed in supplication, asking them to read his book. Again, this was transcribed by the students at Cambridge this year, and my translation you can read at your leisure. So the story, the book itself, is really Santo Kyoden at his best, I think. It's just so out there, so crazy. Everyone knows the classic Japanese folktale of Urashima Taro, who was taken to the dragon palace under the sea by the turtle that he saved. We've already had references to this. Santo Kyoden's bizarre spin-off version is so far off the rails that it's hard to even keep up. The Japanese talent for wild and vivid imagination was alive and well in the Edo period. Now, the story starts in a bustling entertainment district in the human world called Nakasu Shinchi, which is submerged and falls under the control of the Dragon Palace, Ryugu-jo. Living there is a handsome man named Urashima Taro, who is the lover of Princess Otohime, the Dragon King's daughter. But true to the saying, a beautiful woman only holds your interest for 3 days, he quickly tires of her and has an affair with a beautiful courtesan who is a koi fish, a carp fish. Urashima and the koi courtesan have a child. Being the offspring of a human and a fish, the child has a human head and a fish body. Urashima says, if I weren't Otohime's lover, I would have put this kid on display, but I can't do that, sorry, and throws the child into the sea. The poor mermaid child is picked up by a loveless, unpopular fisherman named Heiji. As the mermaid grows up into a young woman, she pleads with Heiji, "Please make me your wife. Please hold me and sleep beside me." Though initially shocked by her appearance, Heiji is won over by her beautiful face and agrees to marry her. Word of this strange situation spreads, twisted and exaggerated. A rumor arises that putting up a charm written by Heiji will keep plague spirits away from your house. So people flock to his home. Heiji is overwhelmed but can't bring himself to admit that he married a mermaid, so he doesn't deny the rumors. Feeling pity for the mermaid abandoned by her parents, Heiji cherishes her as his wife. Once he mistakes her for a goldfish and tries to feed her goldfish food, but she's a koi, a carp, so she doesn't eat that kind of thing. Apparently, koi have gourmet tastes. However, Heiji is extremely poor. The mermaid tries to perform a charm to make money fall from the sky, but she has no hands, so it doesn't work. Then, out of nowhere, a hand appears to help her with the charm, and real money starts falling from the sky. The helper is Denza, the owner of a brothel. While Heiji is away, the mermaid signs a contract on the screen there to become a courtesan, writing a note by holding a brush in her mouth. Denza names her Uondo, a play on fish person, dresses her up and hides her fishtail with long underpants, you can see on the right side there. Uondo, with the help of stage assistants in Japanese theatre called kuroko, takes part in the grand Oiran Dochu, the courtesan parade. She receives her first client, but the client can't stand her fishy smell and runs away. The kuroko try to stop him, but Uondo falls asleep from exhaustion. Denza's idea fails and he returns the mermaid to Heiji, grumbling about the wasted cost of costumes and other start-up expenses, even though it was all his idea. Now, unsure what to do with the mermaid, Heiji receives advice from a local scholar. They say licking a mermaid can make you live longer. Heiji immediately opens a mermaid licking parlor. At 100,000 yen per lick, it's wildly popular with long queues. Heiji drums and sings "Lick to the Rhythm" to keep up the festive mood. And some customers even say, "I'd like to lick a little lower, if you know what I mean." A neighbour, envious of Heiji's success, tries to dress his own wife up in a carp streamer from the boys' festival to attract customers, but no one comes. He ends up fighting with his wife in front of their child. Meanwhile, Heiji gets rich thanks to the mermaid. Jealous men come to woo the mermaid, but she is not a chaste woman. She's a chaste fish and turns them all down. Heiji licks his mermaid so often to regain his youth that he eventually regresses into a child, crying, "I want milk." I explained to you, it's hard to keep up. At that moment, the mermaid's parents, Urashima Taro and the koi courtesan, show up. And they use the tamate bako, a magic box, to restore Heiji to an ideal youthful age. And for some reason, it also makes him handsome. And then the mermaid's fish body sheds off, revealing a beautiful human form underneath. They sell her discarded fish skin as a rare item and make a fortune. And so the two lived happily ever after. The end. Well, now, Tsutaju also published kibyoshi he had written himself. To remind you, kibyoshi are literally yellow-covered books. They're adult satirical illustrated books named for their yellow covers, popular in the late 18th century. Tsutaju's first was titled Motoki ni Masaru Uwaki Banashi, published when he was 41. While the second title was Shintai Kaicho Ryakuengi, and this was published 7 years later, near the end of his life. Both are boldly inscribed with the pseudonym Stano Karamaru, used as his pen name when writing kyoka comedic poems. Tsutaju had continued to rely on Kyoden for new satirical works, but he never gave up digging for new talent. He eventually found two, Katsukawa Bakin, an admirer of Kyoden, who continued to write his own work while working for Tsutaju, and my favourite, Jippensha Ikku, who started helping out at Tsutaju's Koshodo publishing house. These enormously talented writers, discovered by Tsutaju, would go on to become two of the most famous authors of the late Edo period. Now, Motoki ni Masaru Uwaki Banashi, a kibyoshi published in 1790, second year of Kansei, under the name of Tsutaya no Karamaru, illustrations done by the renowned ukiyo-e artist Kitagawa Utamaro. The work is structured in 3 volumes and presents a protagonist who introduces a series of outrageous, unusual business ideas in a humorous and entertaining fashion. I'll give you a few examples, including the sale of shelving, I guess rental as well, during the Dolls Festival in early March. The idea was to rent sets of shelves and dolls to households for this festival. But the trademark mountain, and I guess this is funny as a mountain of unrentable stock, as the stock becomes old and unwanted. Tsutaju's business idea here is to fill a trench with sake lees, or mash, left over from sake making, and sand, and raise or preserve clams to sell. Again, the festival time is March, but set in the Yoshiwara courtesan district. Customers weren't interested, and the scheme collapses in ridicule. But, I don't know, not such a bad idea to preserve and present clams in shop fronts. The idea here is to sell carp streamers for the boys' festival in May, but this year the weather turns out that it rains every day, means that no streamers are sold, and the idea is a disaster. The idea here is for a swimming pool, which seems like a good idea to me, but maintenance costs kills off the idea. Swimming at the time is called water practice, mizuren. The cost to build this was enormous, as all swimming pools are. And then for adults, the training fee was 200 copper coins per person, and for children, 150 copper coins. Quoting directly, moreover, I've transcribed the writing at the top, since in summer one must endure the heat. People say water is cold. It chills you. If you drink it, your complexion will turn dark. It is no good for your health. But because it is considered very important for one's well-being, a place for water practice, mizuren no keiko, was established. A bath 3 ken wide, about 5.5 meters wide, was built so that people could practice swimming within. It was said that inside there was also a diving place, as the water was deep, one could truly practice. At first, even the noble Lord Hajimeishi came to practice there. There'd be some pun on that name, I'm not sure what. But when more and more people entered the water, the cost of upkeep became heavy, losses mounted, and eventually the place was closed down and abandoned. Therefore, everyone, strengthen your legs, train yourselves thoroughly in walking, is one of the quotations. Even if only a little training is done, it will help prevent catching colds. So the pool goes bankrupt, but there's some sage advice for exercise. So quite sensible, I think. This page worried me. It describes a seasonal amusement, Nenohi no Asobi, which is the outing date on the rat day of the new year. So it's a new year outing. There's jokes about hunting insects and deer cries. It says that at New Year, people played at mock battles, striking at one another. But this time the idea was to take a deer into the mountain path and make it cry. And this becomes the entertainment. But if there are too few insects, it is dull, so they prepare many insect cages, you can see, thinking to profit from them. Yet in the end, no profit comes at all. The deer keeps crying, endlessly crying. They say, "Stop it now, enough of that." And so they let others take care of the beast. Even so, the deer's voice at first, it was amusing, but in truth it soon becomes distressing. "Do not make such hunts," they say. "Do not act in such a cruel way." Still they keep tying the poor animal up, attaching ropes and so on. Those who heard the story, only 3 or so men spread it about. But that was the end. No new customers came forward. And so in the end, it became a tiresome and wretched business indeed. End quote. This one I thought was not a bad idea at all. We have an October scene describing a business idea of showing, again renting chrysanthemums for a fee, and translating, because some people are too busy to go out and see the chrysanthemums, a scheme was devised called misegiku, or display chrysanthemums. One would carry the flowers around and show them for a price. For each plot of chrysanthemum, the fee for a short display was 200 mon for half a day. It said that this made a very fine form of hospitality for guests. However, it goes on. Now, chrysanthemums, they say, are actually things many people dislike. Too much fragrance, and not everyone enjoys looking at them. The quotations are, "Misegiku, misegiku, will you not view these fine chrysanthemums? Decorate your garden with them. Please take a look." But again, the scheme fails. And another one, this many. Here we see a summer festival with lots of ideas for cooling off, like spraying water from a water pistol in the bottom left-hand corner there, the bamboo water pistol. Great ideas, it seems to me, but these also failed. Puns abound for flower water, and hana's flower and nose. So there are puns about flower, water, and snot, of course, and perhaps this is the reason for its failure. By this time, we're starting to really feel sorry for our protagonist. Junjiro was his name. We see him late at night, exhausted, barely able to grab a bowl of noodles from a street seller. To quote directly, "As for Junjiro, everything he did so straightforwardly, but not a single thing was of any interest. Because of that, he exerted himself greatly, and to finish off, even small matters, he would fuss over them, tying things up neatly, but then he would have complete strangers put away the tools and the implements. Since there was no reliable person, not one he could depend on, from the end of the day until near dawn, he walked about in the cold night, passing the time, and then returned exhausted. At home he would take wheat noodles, somen, or perhaps soba, and eat them, but the cold was unbearable. Was it already the 8th hour of the night? The whole world seems silent, wrapped in stillness. We then have a profound reflection on how to perhaps lead a better life, describing Amano Jakuro. Translation is, Amano Jakuro, having wasted his money on trivial things, could not restrain his greed. He dropped his horns of desire and bent his head, smoothing it down, saying, "This is the way of heaven." Thus Amano thought, or perhaps reflected, and lived a contented life. He lived quietly and happily. At last there was nothing more to say. He simply remained silent. The passage emphasizes the character's transformation. After indulging in trivial or greedy behavior, he resigns himself to humility and accepts the way of heaven, living contentedly in silence. So I'll finish there, and please join me for part 2 of this presentation about Tsutaya Juzaburo. Thank you.